Thank you, Hermione. I'm sorry, guys, for being a little bit late. It's just the way we do things in Brazil. But my name is Beatriz, as Hermione introduced me. I'm a researcher at the School of Sciences here at the Museum of Tomorrow, and we are very, very happy to host you all. So welcome to our museum. Here, we want to talk about relevant topics for our planet, for the future of our lives, and all of other things that live with us. So this is a space for dialogue between science and society. And as I understand, this is also the main goal of this symposium, fostering dialogue and also sharing expertise on such an important topic as is the ocean and its biodiversity. I'm a biologist, and in my past life, I was actually a marine biologist, so I'm very happy to be here and be part of this. So very excited. And we also share other synergies, the museum and the BBNJ Symposium. For the museum's 10-year anniversary, which was last December, we launched an exhibition about oceans, which is right outside. And if you guys haven't catched it, please do during lunch. I'm sorry for those of you online, you just have to come to Rio to see it. And this exhibition also starts off our new curatorial cycle, which talks about the 4 elements. And you guessed it, our first year is about water. So water is the element of memory. It's our first home. It flows, it carries, distributes, transforms. And we started this cycle already transforming, mainly the way we see our main values here at the museum. For the last 10 years, the museum had 2 main values, which is sustainability and conviviality. But for the next 10 years, we switched it a bit, and we understand now that sustainability is conviviality. But what does it mean? It means that we see sustainability as coexistence. So coexistence between forms of life, between different knowledge systems, between human and more than human, between what is seen and what is sensed. And it is no longer just a state we can achieve, but something that must be built together. And this is also what you guys are doing here and throughout the BBNJ agreement. We are, after all, still in a decade of ocean science, and we will host you all again here in Rio in 2027 for the Ocean Decade Conference. So you are collectively building a new understanding of ocean sciences, and we are glad to help out, even if just for a little bit. So we wish you a great symposium and hope to see a lot more of you in the next year. Welcome once again and enjoy the next 3 days. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Beatrice. It's wonderful to get that slightly different perspective on what we all do and to hear about the public engagement that happens through the museum. And I hope we'll all be able to pop into that ocean exhibition. It will be open today and on Thursday. It's not open tomorrow, but I believe we can arrange tickets, speak to the registration desk. So, Maria, I'm going to ask you to get your panel ready. And while that happens, a couple of points of housekeeping. Just a reminder, we're hybrid. So we're going to try and get back from lunch, back from coffee on time, because we'll have 400 people online waiting for us. We hope that you're going to post on social media about your experience and the discussions that are taking place. We have 3 hashtags that we would appreciate you using. They are 3 BBNJ Symposium, BBNJ 2026, and BBNJ in Rio. So use them and we can all connect online as well. We will be using Slido for questions. Audience online, we will be displaying a QR code. You can also just go to Slido and our code is BBNJ 2026, and that will enable you to submit your questions. For those of you here with us, you can use Slido as well if you want to, but we'd also like a verbal discussion when the chair will guide you through that. We have roving microphones with our volunteers. Just a note about the museum, no smoking inside the building. Museum staff are around. Please ask them any questions. Out here, we have our coffee break. We have facilities, toilets, that sort of thing. It's a wonderful building, so please just ask if you're unsure about anything. Just a note about lunch. Lunch, you're responsible for your own. Don't worry, there's going to be coffee available all day. After all, we are in Brazil. But for lunch, we ask that you head out, and in the welcome book, you will find a list of fantastic cafes and eateries around the venue. I just ask you to be back here on time. So yeah, just a final point. If you do have any questions, don't hesitate to ask anyone from the MARA team, from the INPO team. We have a set of really marvelous volunteers with us. These are all early career ocean professionals who kindly accepted to help us throughout these days. You can find these wonderful people wearing t-shirts. I know we have one over there. Give us a wave. So find one of those t-shirts, ask questions, be kind to them, let them know if you need anything, and also if you have any good job opportunities on BBNJ research for them. They all want to hear from you. Okay, so thank you for your patience. We haven't eaten into your time too badly, panel one. Panel one really sets the scene for us. It's all about the biodiversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, why it's important, how do we conserve it now and into the future. I'm delighted to hand over now to my colleague, Professor Murray Roberts, co-founder and director of MARA Consultants and Professor of Applied Marine Biology and Ecology at the University of Edinburgh, who is our chair for the first panel. Murray.
Thank you, Hermione.
Are we all right? Yes? Do you want to try use this?
Thank you, Hermione. Great to be with you all, and a tremendous panel discussion awaits you. I do want to make sure that we have time for questions from the audience. So I'm going to ask the panelists to bear in mind to keep your answers maybe a little bit trimmed so that we can open it to discussion. I'm confident we can get round, I hope, our 2 rounds of discussion and into questions and answers. So the deep sea, the areas beyond national jurisdiction. Strange place, a place we don't understand well, a place that most people on the planet would never get to see, a place maybe in history that was thought to be mysterious, maybe scary, maybe dangerous, maybe full of sea monsters. The old charts show these incredible drawings of monsters and places in these places that are actually, as we all know, most of our planet. But Angel, to begin our conversation today, could you tell us, as a deep sea biologist yourself, a biological oceanographer from Univali here in Brazil, could you tell us about what characterizes the deep and open ocean and the animals that live there?
Thank you, Murray. Well, okay, in my mind, what I think is the central point of these great environments is the size, is the extension, is the vastness of the open ocean and deep sea. And it's not only geographically, it's in vertical terms. So it's many, many times larger than any other space in the planet, and many, 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 many times larger than any other aquatic environment on Earth. And what this creates is a lot of variability in environmental conditions. So we find like important gradients of light that's restricted to the surface areas, important gradients of temperature, of pressure, even the food availability is concentrated. So in most of these parts, we find conditions that are not observed in coastal areas. And we actually tend to call them like extreme environmental conditions for the existence of life. But every time we go out to explore these areas, and we have done so in the very, very tiny part of this environment, we do find a very rich and diverse fauna that thrives in these areas. And this fauna is not really originated in these deep, extreme environments. They're actually descendants of lineages that were originated in the shores, and that found that some in the past maybe 300, 200 million years developed lineages that were invaded, that occupy these extreme areas, and by doing so, they develop the most amazing adaptations, and that's what makes the biodiversity of these areas so interesting. But my final point is also that one of characteristics of this area is that it's mostly deprived of food. Food is scarce in most of the open ocean and the deep sea, except in some areas, or some rather small areas, so there's a combination of processes that produce and concentrate food, and that's where the biodiversity concentrates. And this process could be like physical processes, like water flow interacting with the topography that concentrates food and provides food for corals in the deep sea, for example, or biogeochemical areas like the cold seeps and hydrothermal vents, where the water interacts with the geological processes, volcanic processes, and creates this unique environment based on chemosynthesis. And even biological process, like a big dead whale that sinks down to the abyssal seafloor, and for a long time it provides food for a great part of biodiversity in this area. So the things that the more we learn about these different places and this very unique areas that can be very small, as I mentioned, we find more different fauna that are adapted to these very specific conditions. And I just will end by reminding me of a figure that is in this review by Eva Ramirez-Jodra, which is there, and many others, that show that as time went by, we could be like an exponential increase of new ecosystems and of course many more new species adapted to these ecosystems. And that curve is not stabilizing, it is going exponentially increasing. So the more we go out and study these areas, the more biodiversity, the more unknown ecosystem we find. And I'm sure that all the deep sea scientists know that we will not be surprised to find very new things in the ocean. So that's one important point.
No, thank you so much, Angel. Absolutely wonderful. So we've heard about the diversity, not just of life in the ocean, but the diversity of habitats. And it takes me to a quick anecdote where I think we do have an issue we need to address as a community. In this room, we know a lot about what Angel is talking about, but we shouldn't assume that in the wider world. I was at COP26 in Glasgow, the UNFCCC COP, Glasgow, Scotland, talking to somebody on the street, talking about marine carbon dioxide removal and sinking macroalgae to the seafloor, to the deep sea, because that's fine, nothing lives there. This is not the case. There is still a job of work to be done to be out and raising the awareness of all the issues that Angel is talking about. But the issue isn't one, mosaic of different habitats and mosaic of different organisms. It's a highly connected space in various interesting and complicated ways. And I'd like now to go to a slightly different form of life and a slightly different way by which we study the connectivity of the ocean, to introduce Ana Sequeira, Research Director, Founder, and Lead Coordinator of the Megamove Project at the Australian National University. Now, Anna is online, and I hope we can bring Anna up onto the screen at this point. I see some thumbs up from the back, so all being well, Anna will appear. Let's give us a second. Anna, it's so good to see you. Hello, and thank you for being with us. I'm not even going to ask what time of day it is, but we really appreciate you being with us. Anna, please, I have a question for you. Whether you could please tell us, from your experience working with Megamove, how large marine species move across the vast spaces in the ocean?
Hi, Mary. Thanks for having me, and hi, everyone. Hope you can hear me. Yeah, so the large animals in the ocean, and we're talking about whales, sharks, seals, penguins, turtles, even polar bears. They tend to move a lot in the ocean, and so they are a particular case and present a particular challenge for conservation, and specifically when we're talking about protecting the ocean, because these animals move a lot. So the animals move from different countries. They don't move only within specific areas. So I'm showing a slide, hope you can see, that shows the Megamove data set, where you can see different animals, from birds to whales to sharks and penguins, and in different colors. And this is a really powerful reminder that the oceans are alive, with these animals moving through even entire ocean basins. So what is really interesting about these animals is that they use the space differently. So they use areas of the ocean as migratory corridors. So they just set a particular direction and they move in a very directed way towards another location. That's their goal, their sort of arrival location. And then they use other areas of the ocean more in a residential type of way. So areas they use, for example, for feeding, for mating, for resting. So they tend to hang around a little bit longer. And so when we think about protection, this is why they become a very challenging species to protect, because they don't exist in one area and live there all their lives. They move around, and they move thousands of kilometers in the ocean. And so it's important for us to understand where are those areas where they spend most time, areas they use as residencies somehow. But then it's also very important to protect those corridors, because they connect different residential areas that these animals use for different types of important behaviors. And so that's what presents a big challenge, is figuring out where to protect and also when, because these animals keep moving through the ocean. So across all these species, of course, some of them, people are more aware of these long migrations. So for example, whales, a lot of people know that they do these very long migrations from, tropical regions to polar regions. But a lot of other species, including seabirds, and some of them, they are actually not that big in terms of size, physical size. They also cross entire ocean basins from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere. And so, yeah, it presents a really important challenge. Also, areas where they feed in the ocean will have links with other species that live in the other ecosystems that are present in those particular locations, which might also be the reason why the animals move there. So, in terms of what are the implications for how we think about marine protected areas, and particularly now within the BBNJ that is entered into force, and now we need to make the decision of protecting 30%. Really, the key question is, where will those 30% be? And when we think about biodiversity, these types of large animals, charismatic species like marine megafauna, really need to have a place in terms of protection, in terms of where the protected areas will be for this biodiversity to benefit from that type of conservation action. So the important thing, linking these migratory species with areas, fixed areas that are protected, is to make sure that those areas are selected in important locations that are used for by these species for the important behaviors that they need to do. So generally speaking, that presents a big challenge. And yeah, that's why I think it's important to have these conversations and to bring people to the table so that we can talk about the most important areas of the ocean that need to be protected across different biodiversity. We were just hearing Angel talking about deep sea. I'm talking more about pelagic animals. So pelagic animals are animals that use the water column and travel through the water column across from the surface to depths. And there's, of course, a lot of other important ecosystems and other species that are also important to take into consideration. So it's important that we bring all these perspectives together to then select where protection should be. I hope this answers your question.
Anna, thank you very much. That was absolutely wonderful. And I think that if you haven't in the audience and online seen the Mega Move project, do Google it and look at the background to some of the statistics and the approaches that Anna's team have pulled together. It's quite remarkable. So Alex, following from Anna's points, could you tell us a little more about connectivity in the deep sea, and particularly, what are the implications when we think about the BBNJ treaty?
Yeah, connectivity in the ocean takes many forms, Murray. So we've got physical connectivity of the ocean in terms of currents and the thermohaline circulation, which is so important in maintaining conditions on Earth for life. We've got ecological connectivity, and we've just heard quite a lot about that in terms of the way that animals move across the ocean to use different resources. But we can also think about food web connectivity there, who eats who. We can also think about habitat provision, so which animals provide habitat, places to live for others. And then there's population connectivity, so the way that adult animals move and larvae dispersed to connect different places in terms of the populations of marine species. So there are many different facets to this connectivity business. And just to really emphasize, this doesn't just operate horizontally in the ocean, it also operates vertically as well. The ocean obviously is a three-dimensional space. If we think about areas beyond national jurisdiction in 3 dimensions, that's 95% of the ocean. There are some really fantastic examples of this. So, for example, the largest migration in the world happens every day in the ocean when micronectonic species, so things like lanternfish and larger shrimp and squid, when the sun goes down, they move up to the surface to feed, and then at dawn, they move back down into the deep ocean. Through doing that, they actually draw carbon down into the deep ocean for sequestration. So connectivity is absolutely critical to consider in the ocean. It's critical in terms of environmental impact assessment. And as has just been said, when we think about networks of protected areas and other effective conservation measures in the ocean, connectivity is a crucial consideration.
Alex, thank you very, very much. And I realize I forgot to properly introduce Alex. I know on the screen there's an abstracted NOC. Alex is a research director at the National Oceanography Centre in the United Kingdom. I would now like to move the conversation along to an issue that kind of combines and integrates a lot of what we're talking about, and that's information and data. So it's a great pleasure to introduce Jessie Cleary, who is a geographer and marine data scientist at the Marine Geospatial Ecology Lab of Duke University. So Jessie, it's wonderful to have you with us. And I think we're actually going to build on a point that I actually scribbled down Janine's quote because I thought it was so wonderful. Janine said to us, "How well does knowledge travel from discovery to decision?" It's a kind of, call to action, I think. A wonderful way to phrase it, much better than my question here is going to be. But Jessie, from everything we've heard, it's clear we do have scientific understanding and knowledge in some regions, but how do we pull all this data together and look for trends? And I'd also love to know what you think in terms of how we can use remote sensed and emerging artificial intelligence technologies to contribute to that understanding.
Yeah, thank you, Murray, and thanks to the organizers for the opportunity to be here. It's nice to step away from my computer screen and satellites and databases to engage in this topic. So yeah, I think I'm going to start my comments by talking a little bit about why we build these data systems. We obviously spend a lot of resources to observe the global ocean through lots of cruises in different locations, and we want to make sure that those data are widely usable after that core scientific work has happened. And so through the Census of Marine Life, we started the Ocean Biodiversity Information System, or OBIS. And the goal of OBIS was to build a data center, a system of systems to hold all of that global information and make that available for future uses. And I think a lot of foresight there in terms of having a data system that's ready for us to be thinking about for BBNJ implementation. So the OBIS data center currently, I think the last I checked, over 160 million records globally for 200,000 taxa. So it gives us a pretty wide view of information around the world. And I think the goal there for the founders of the OBIS network really was to give us this sort of macroscopic view, or build us a tool that allows us to see something that's really much larger than any one of these individual science cruises. And so I think we've kind of developed that, and I know under the leadership of IOC UNESCO that OBIS database has continued to grow and is going to be an important part of BBNJ implementation. And one last point I'll make about that, not only does it give us this large-scale view of global distribution of biodiversity, but it also helps us as we think about the network criteria, which are part of Annex 1 in the BBNJ treaty, is we need to think about ABNT proposals, the biodiversity and important areas within those proposals, and how those are then related to potentially regions around those proposals, ocean basins, or the globe. So I think a lot of foresight to build a system of systems to store this biodiversity information for BBNJ implementation.
Thank you so much, Jesse. And before I forget, do post questions on Slido in the room and online. It's an option to ask your questions in person if you want to, if you're here with us in Rio, but also to bring everyone together and so we can vote on the questions that you want to see addressed by the panel. You can use Slido and you can vote on the questions that are coming in. So turning from Jesse, to Natalie, and Natalie is with us from Conservation International and is Director for the Marine and Coastal Program for CI here in Brazil. It's wonderful to have you with us, Natalie. And really turning, I think, to what arguably in terms of BBNJ and everything we're talking about is the most important aspect of our discussion. We've heard a lot here about the deep and open ocean, about connectivity and the remarkable movement of animals across the planet, but what about people? Isn't the most important component of conservation planning about how we bring people into decision making?
Thank you, Murray. Hello, everyone. Good morning. And good morning to the remote people. Yes, people really matters in this process. And I want to speak on behalf of CI and how we support governments and people and local communities. For instance, designing and designating marine protected areas also on high seas. We don't have BBNJ in place yet, but we can mirror the experiences of large marine protected areas offshore. We know that those extraordinary ecosystems are really hard to enforce, to manage, and to research. It's expensive, and it's far from the coast, and this brings much more complexity. And due to it, we needed to engage people because we needed to build a joint vision for implement BBNJ. We cannot see people apart of the conservation process and also the policy and science interface process, but people need to be part of it, mainly the community. And I want to picture this around our experience with Gomes Salles and Nazca in Chile, where we supported the designation of a marine protected area. We are still in the process. And it was one of the first countries in the world that's clearly announcing that intends to designate a marine protected area in high seas. And in this process, the traditional knowledge it was a fundamental part and core part of the consultation process in the design of the marine protected area. Marine protected areas in the high seas may have a cultural value for coastal communities. And in Chile, for instance, the Rapa Nui communities, they use a lot those areas of the high seas, and this is embedded on their history because the Polynesian voyagers use it to navigate from their areas to the Rapa Nui communities, following the stars, but also the dynamic that the seamounts created in those areas. So we had the cultural value, which is an important component, but we needed the scientific component. So we had like independent stakeholders that support like scientific cruises, and through a coalition and alliances that we can see here in the screen, they were able to engage and to confirm all the information that the local community had shared about the local biodiversity and the importance of its area. But beyond that, we also needed to guarantee the intergenerational component of the treaty, because we need to safeguard biodiversity for the future. And this includes the IPOC, the indigenous and local communities that has to be consulted. But also we need to include the youth voices, because we need to safeguard the ocean and the high seas and the biodiversity for the future. And saying that, we can learn from other conventions and agreements, because we have regional fisheries body implementing their management agreements. We have the Biodiversity Convention. Now we have BBNJ. But we need to simplify, because if we make this so complex, no one will understand. And we need to engage the society. And engaging the society will include ocean literacy, will include like scientists translating data to the society, engaging all levels of the society and influencers, for instance, because we really need to support this. We need cooperation, not only bilateral cooperation, but multicultural cooperation. And this has to be embedded in the society. So people is the foundation, and the implementation of the BBNJ really relies on people's shoulder. We need to make BBNJ accessible for the society.
Thank you, Natalie. I think you've said that absolutely beautifully. So wonderful, wonderful intervention. What I'm going to do is ask the panel if they want to come up on anything that they've heard in the discussion, and then I'm going to go very quickly to a couple of Slido questions, hoping some have come in, and then we have another round of conversation that I'm hoping we can fit in the next 23 minutes. Anything that people would like to come back on, or shall I go to a question? I think a question. So can we bring the questions up and we'll see what's coming in from the floor here in Rio and also online. Okay. Thanks, Hermione. So I'm looking at the most popular. I'm just simply going to go to that. All right, that makes my life really easy. Anonymous asks, considering the fisheries sector, is closing vast ocean areas the best way to protect highly migratory species that only pass through? Could I put that question first to Anna?
Yeah, so I had trouble hearing the question. I could not read on the screen. Do you mind repeating briefly?
I'll repeat it, absolutely. Considering the fishing sector, is closing vast ocean areas the best way to protect highly migratory species that only pass through?
Thank you. Yeah, so fisheries closures is obviously a very contentious subject, and so there's a lot involved with making a decision like that. I think the most important way to look at this is to consider the potential for particular areas that are of key importance to these species. And if it's an area where they are passing through at specific times of the year, then we can start talking about closures that are in time, not necessarily permanent closures. So if there's a particular season or a particular month when there's a specific behavior, whether that it's migration or breeding or whatever other important behavior for many species, then it's important to consider the ways that the tools to generate protection and conservation can be used. So one potential idea is to use temporal closures. So it can be a closure during a particular month, for example, and then fishing can continue as business as usual. So that's one way to suggest that. The other way is to think about mitigation strategies. So even though fishing can still continue, there's potentially a lot of mitigation strategies that can be implemented, whether there is through adjustment of fishing gear or through some thresholds that are implemented during the fishing operations as well. So there's a set of tools that can be used, and then it will depend on the specific location and the specific uses of that area in terms of fishing, what type of fishing occurs there.
Thank you, Anna. Anyone else on the panel like to come in on this question? Alex?
Yeah, I can do. I think Anna has really captured the major points here. We should really look at the key parts of the ocean in terms of protection and sustainable management of resources. So we might, in the case of, say, tuna, look at key feeding areas, key spawning areas, key areas of habitat for these migratory species.
Thank you very much. Now, that was great. Slider's working, and I'm being a bit the guinea pig in panel one to try this. Lisa, yes. A question from the floor? Then we have the diversity both of Slido. A microphone to the center, please. And after this, I'm going to go back to some more discussion, and then we'll take some more questions as we come up to coffee. Thanks, Lisa.
I tried putting this in Slido, but it was too many characters. So as scientists, we know that the lowest productivity areas in the ocean have the highest biodiversity. But we want to protect some really productive areas that also have lower biodiversity. So my question is, How do we reconcile the use of biodiversity metrics in deciding what parts of the ocean we're going to protect?
That's a great question. Who would like to pick this one up? You'll have a volunteer, Alex? And
Yeah, maybe if I have first stab. I think that the absolutely biodiversity has to play a key role in, how we decide to conserve the ocean. One of the things we've got to bear in mind is lack of knowledge here, because obviously as you move further away from land and into deeper water, our knowledge base decreases. So, for example, in the Clarion-Clipperton fracture zone, recent work on the SmartX project, looking at the life living in this area, which might end up being subject to mining, it was found that something like, I think it's 94% of the species there are undescribed. And this is thousands and thousands of species. So we've got to kind of take into account here the kind of unknowns or known unknowns of the system. But equally, we've got to consider many other aspects of ocean function, so where the important areas are for primary production, where that production gets exported to, where the important places are for these large ocean predators, and also where the really important places are in terms of human activity as well. And all this has to be taken into account in really a systematic conservation planning process. And I think maybe you'll have something.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And I think what you mentioned, that you covered a lot of the points that I would make, that just biodiversity itself is one of the indicative criteria, but there are others that help us identify areas in need of management. You mentioned important life history areas, for example, which may be for individual species potentially, and not areas that are very biodiverse potentially. So yeah, those are good comments from Alex, and I would agree with those.
thank you so much. So in essence, we need to figure out what's a kind of a safe operating space for humanity in these areas of the planet about which we know so little. And I think actually Lisa's put us onto a really interesting theme that picks up some of the discussion points we wanted to follow on. And I wondered if anyone, Alex or others, would like to reflect a bit more perhaps on how precautionary we need to be in the way that we plan our activities.
Well, the BBNJ agreement includes the precautionary principle as a general underlying principle, and really precaution helps us to balance this lack of knowledge with whatever measures we take. And in a way, the more knowledge we have about an area, the more precise we can be in terms of, if we're considering spatial conservation measures, for example, the more precise we can be in terms of where we would place protection. So precaution really works hand in hand with the level of knowledge we have of the ocean.
Would anyone else like to come in? Angel?
Yeah, just thinking about precaution, I think I agree completely with Alex. But I'm kind of worried sometimes about precaution, because if you have strong economical interests in areas, maybe precaution will not be enough in the coming time. So I hope that precaution is not a way to stop the scientific discovery of scientific studies, in a way that we need more information in an area that we are precautionously preserving, to make that knowledge account for describing better the area and justifying the existence of that protected area. Otherwise, I think it would become maybe fragile, facing like economic pressure.
Thank you. So it's a super point, and I think it comes back to that discussion we were having earlier, that the deep and open ocean remains the least explored part of planet Earth. So quite naturally, there is tremendous lack of knowledge. There are some areas where we have reasonable understandings of function and diversity. But what do the panel think about how we can deal with that lack of knowledge when it comes to implementing BBNJ? Are there some areas or approaches that one might think could be interesting to share and expand upon? Alex?
I think one of the keys here, Murray, is technology and technological innovation. with such a vast area of the ocean, we can't cover it all with research expeditions on ships. You know, when you're talking about vessels costing between $45,000 to $100,000 a day, that is a very expensive process. So we really must kind of plan where to send those sort of all singing and all dancing research expeditions. But new developments in autonomous technology, things like eDNA approaches, using networks of instruments we've already deployed in the ocean can be very, very useful. And I heard a wonderful example at Ocean Sciences meeting of using ocean bottom seismometers, so instruments we use to measure seismic activity in the ocean, actually being used to detect the calls of whales. So we can then get information about how whales are using ocean space as well.
Thank you so much. Jesse, please.
Yeah, so great points there, and wanted to add another piece about areas that we don't currently have a lot of data. So I mentioned the OBIS database has, 160 million records around the world. They're very concentrated in space and time and don't cover ABNJ that well. So OBIS and other institutions are now producing predictive models of species distributions using oceanographic information and improvements in satellite remote sensing to predict the distribution of species around the world. And so that information, I think, is getting at a much higher resolution. I know OBIS has, and others, our colleagues in the Aquamaps project have just produced a paper about this modeling approach, getting predictions globally at a 5-kilometer resolution. And so I think these approaches give us a better sense potentially of where animals could be in the ocean with associated uncertainty around those. But one other element I would just mention around that is so once we have those predictions, how we use those is really a difficult challenge. We need to think a little bit about, as a community, how we deal with the uncertainty related to those. And one element of that also that I think will be germane this week is some of those predictions now include not just the current ocean as a baseline for predicting distributions, but ocean conditions into the future under several climate change scenarios. And so I think that gives us the ability to think about climate-smart ABNT proposals, which I think will be a topic for us to talk about this week.
Thank you so much. So I've got one issue that I want to come back to. I think the time's okay. I've got 10 minutes, maybe 11 minutes, Hermione. But there's a question on Slido that I think we really should take to bring Anna from Australia back into the conversation. Anna, you may have seen it on Slido already. I think it's our most popular question in the votes. Again, from Anonymous. There's a lot of questions from Anonymous today. Considering ecological connectivity and the migratory... we dealt with that question, which means I'm going to the next most popular question, which is actually a follow-on to that question. And Anna, you may have a view on this, but others also, I think, may well have a view on this. Considering the fishing sector, here it goes. Under BBNJ framework, how will our FMOs be recognized or incorporated into this agreement? So I know there'll be a lot of thoughts on that and the duties not to undermine existing agreements. Who would like to pick up that question on the panel? Alex, and then Natalie.
I think the key thing here is to make sure that all these so-called IFBs, so institutions, frameworks and bodies, are included in things like ABMT proposals from a very early stage. They have to be consulted right at the beginning, because what you don't want to happen is for those organisations to come in at the review stage of a proposal and raise objections. So the best way to do that is to really start off with a kind of almost open table approach, put on the table the proposals that are being put forward and discuss with the relevant IFBs those proposals. That may then need a process of negotiation, but ultimately you want to reach your conservation objectives, and you've got to do that in a way that everybody agrees with.
Thank you, Alex. And Natalie?
Yeah, I'm very well aligned with Alex. And beyond not undermining, we need to have a clear process for consultation among bodies, because these need to have a high level of transparency. And what I want to raise is that we needed to strengthen cooperation and not competition, because the RFMOs, the regional fisheries body, already have your advisory bodies or scientific bodies well consolidated. And BBNJ is creating this right now. And there is enough space for both bodies work together in the process since from the scratch. And this will develop stewardship and ownership in the process, and raise also financial sustainability, and they will raise transparency, and people will trust in the process. And to design climate smart marine protected areas, for instance, will rely on this collaborative science among both bodies.
Thank you very much. Don't worry. I think I managed to log myself out of Slido, but don't worry, it's come back again. It's so great being the first up, isn't it? Wow. So I've got a few minutes remaining. I still want to get to my last point. Rather than Slido, another question from the room. My eye actually went to the back first, so sorry. Can we get a microphone to this gentleman here? Just pop your hand up. Just here, pop your hand up. There we go, microphone's on its way.
Hi, thank you for the very interesting panel. I'm a computer scientist, so my question is on data, or more so the lack of data in this case. Vessel traffic and fishing fleets cover more of the deep ocean than any research ship ever could, yet that observational capacity remains completely untapped in this scenario. So I'm wondering, what can be done to push these commercial avenues to create legitimate citizen science avenues for relevant BBNJ deep sea data?
Thank you so much for your question. I'd like to bring Anna straight back on so that we know. Anna, would you like to come in on that? It's always harder when you're online to get the first call to answer the question. I don't want to lose you.
Yes, my understanding of the question is that it was somehow how to bring citizen science and general tools to increase data in the deep ocean. Is this correct? Is
yes.
My understanding correct? Yeah. I think that would be fantastic. And of course, the more we can leverage existing tools to get data and knowledge, the better, generally speaking. In terms specifically of the deep ocean, it's, Alex was mentioning before, a lot of these ships that are used to collect data in areas beyond national jurisdiction in the deep ocean are extraordinarily expensive. So getting a component of citizen science to collect this type of data would be extremely difficult. However, there's a lot of contributions that can be done using, for example, observational videos collected during those voyages. And so there could be ways to leverage the citizen science type of, the community of citizen scientists that want to participate to then assist science happening behind the scenes. So understanding what the videos are saying and collecting that data. And there's also that's also another way to capitalize on AI as well for automation of identification and all of that. So there's a lot of tools that are now becoming, I think, more readily available that will assist us moving forward and collecting more data. Like Jesse was saying, types of predictive tools, modeling that can assist us understanding what happens when conditions are changing as well. So we have a bit of more a proactive understanding of what the changes might be rather than a reactive approach is also an important way to assist us moving forward and capturing the data that is currently missing in particular areas.
Thank you very, very much, Anna. So we're in the end game now. I know there'll be more comments that want to come in, so I'm going to ask you to follow up with a panel on this afterwards if it's okay. Time is not on our side anymore. I would actually like to bring Natalie back in for the final part of this conversation and then open to everybody, please. But to conclude, I think each of our panels is going to try to conclude with some concrete recommendations which could, we hope, be useful. So in the world, the real world, the world that we live in now, how will BBNJ achieve its objectives? The clearinghouse mechanism will have an integral role to play. Where do you see the key issues? Quick final thoughts from everyone on the panel. I will go first to Natalie, then along the panel, and then to Anna.
Yeah, the clearinghouse mechanism cannot really undermine the other bodies, so need to have a clearly consultation protocol to deliver like these trade-offs between bodies and share the benefits among all the stakeholders and the areas that may impact, like through actions delivering marine protected areas or other tools, ABNT, to suggest conservation-based in areas.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm mostly intrigued by the interaction between the clearinghouse mechanism and existing data centers, and that back and forth I think will be really important as proposals are received and understood, and those proposals then are understood by existing data centers to think about representativity or other network criteria. As we're building a global network, we need to be thinking interactively between existing areas and new proposals. So that back and forth between existing data centers and the CHM, I think, will be really important.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the important point to make is that scientific knowledge is going to underpin every single part of the BBNJ agreement. That is a huge job, and I think it's a huge job for the number of marine scientists we have now. So capacity building and transfer of marine technology is actually going to be really essential for the equitable operation of the BBNJ agreement. So we need to bear that in mind.
Well, I think my point is, and you're going to say this is the scientist asking for money, but it's not, is that somehow the BBNJ keep a mechanism to keep the science happening at sea, in the ocean. Not only the data and the models that we need, and I agree they're quite important, but we actually need more robust data to be able to produce strong proposals.
Thank you, Angel. And last word to Anna from Australia.
Thank you. Yeah, from my perspective, it's important. I agree with everything that has been said, and it's important to also link with the data itself, like Angel was just mentioning. So interoperability of data is going to be key if you want to bring together data from different species, ecosystems, fisheries, and all of it together. So it's a really important concept that needs to underpin all the rest as well. And then, of course, having everyone on the table so that the different perspectives from the different stakeholders, like Natalie was mentioning, can be heard, and everyone will have a say. That will be very important.
Amazing. Thank you, Anna. So Hermione, I see I have 1 minute left, if I'm lucky, before Hermione jumps back on the stage. So I just want to thank everyone who on the panel for an amazing job. Thank you. And I think I'll wrap it there. Everyone needs a coffee. Low-cost technologies also have a huge role to play. You know, the cameras in our phones, 4K cameras, can be deployed at 1,000-meter water depth very cheaply these days. These things can be rolled out and shared across the world, and we need to recognize all disciplines and make everyone move forward together. So with that, thank you again. I'll pass back to Hermione.
Oh, thank you so much, Murray, and to all your panelists for a masterclass in how to open the discussion for our meeting today. Thank you to Anna online. We made it through that first session. I mean, opening ceremony, that seems like ages ago, but thank you to all of you and everybody who contributed. Fantastic opening remarks, incredible keynotes, and then a brilliant panel one. We now have 30 minutes for coffee break. For those of us here in Rio, make your way out to that registration area. Coffee and refreshments will be served. Everybody online, grab yourself a coffee. We'll meet you back online at 11:30. Everybody, see you soon. Thank you very much.